Having been a birth and postpartum doula, and in the world of belly binding for years, both with my clients and through the postpartum times that I've had with all 5 of my children, one of the questions that has come up the most is, when can I start binding after a normal vaginal birth? That's something that I wanted to answer for you today, at least give you a little bit of guidance so that you can make that decision for yourself based on how your body feels, the type of labor and delivery that you went through, and what's going on in your life, how you're handling the change of dynamics in your family with the new baby. I will start by answering the question directly, as soon as you possibly can. What I normally tell my clients and my customers is, as soon as you peacefully can. And what I mean by that is, there are so many things going on, so many different factors that come into play after you have a vaginal birth. And you're adjusting to having this new little person here who just needs you all the time. You're trying to balance maybe other children, you're trying to balance your own health and wellness and taking care of yourself, while also taking care of this new little person. So I know that there is a lot going on, and you know, some women handle it differently than others, and that's perfectly fine. But no matter how you look at it, it is a big change, and there is a certain amount of adjustment, and adding in a new practice during that change can be a little daunting. So, like I said, as soon as you peacefully can. Now, that being said, I would recommend you trying to start binding the day you give birth. Now, there are lots of different opinions on this, and that's perfectly fine. But I'm telling you from my experience with my own 5 children in postpartum times, as well as helping other mamas through their postpartum times, yes, the day that you give birth is a great time to start. And since you have so many other changes going on, it might be a smart move to introduce this new practice, this new ritual at the same time. And then it just integrates itself into this new life that you're creating, this new norm. Now, whether you give birth at home or you give birth in a hospital or a birth center, you're going to end up taking a shower probably within the first few hours after giving birth. That is a great time to start this new ritual. Someone's going to be watching the baby, and this is a great time for you to shower, clean yourself up, and start this new practice. The reason why I suggest starting the day of is because, first of all, you are taking advantage of the relaxin hormone, which is present in your body after birth. Now, this hormone was thought to only last a few days, but now they've done studies to say that it can last in women a few months. So if you don't start binding right away, or if you don't have a bind or just learn about it later and want to start, then you're perfectly fine to still utilize that relaxin hormone weeks, sometimes months postpartum. Now, that relaxin hormone, and I've discussed this in other videos, is not necessary in getting your stomach down. What it is necessary in doing is making your ligaments and joints and all of the connective tissue, like in your hips, more malleable so that you can kind of reshape your hips down to size. Now, most of the women that I've dealt with are less concerned about their hips, and they're more concerned about their belly area. And the relaxin really doesn't play that much of a part with your belly area as it does your hips. So even if you're years postpartum, you can utilize a belly bind and still get the benefits. Going back to immediately after you have the baby, after you take a shower, if you start binding, you're utilizing the relaxin hormone. You're also helping with postpartum bleeding. Now, a lot of moms experience when they bind right after birth, they will get kind of a gush of blood from starting to bind and starting to squeeze that belly area down. But then the bleeding kind of subsides faster. So everyone's different. Everybody's going to experience something different, but that is also my personal experience, that the binding actually helps the bleeding lessen in severity and in length as well. Another great benefit of binding right after birth is that a lot of times our backs are so out of place and our posture is so different from when we had this belly that required us to lean back, and the curvature of our spine is different, and then all of a sudden all this weight is taken off, our sense of balance is changed, and with that comes a very kind of distorted posture for the first few days that can cause a lot of back pain. Now you're having to sit upright to nurse your baby, and that's a whole different kind of posture that you're dealing with. What I found with Bengkung binding is that for myself and for a lot of other women, when they bind, it allows their posture to be more upright. It gives you a kind of framework to help you with your posture when your abs are not doing their job at keeping you upright. Now, your abs are in a really weird state right after you have a baby. They've been stretched over and to the side, and so you can't really rely on them to counteract your back muscles. So binding right after you have a baby is just such a wonderful help in keeping your posture good and in also keeping your back from hurting while you're nursing and walking around after you have a baby. One of the most important aspects of binding immediately after you have a baby is helping with afterbirth pains. So afterbirth pains are the tightening down, the kind of contractions that happen to get your uterus back down to its small size. And in order to do that, there is a amount of cramping that happens that a lot of women liken to contractions. Some women say they feel like PMS cramps, and they can range from that all the way up to full contractions. They normally get worse at night, and they generally happen more when you're breastfeeding. Our bodies are so incredible, and they have these neat symbiotic relationships that happen after you have a baby. And one of those is when you nurse your baby, it stimulates those contractions to help shrink your uterus down. That's why, part of why a lot of women say that their bellies go down a lot faster when they're breastfeeding than if they didn't breastfeed. It's such a neat process. I mean, it really is amazing. But I'll tell you what, at the time when you're going through it, it can be very painful. And the more babies that you have, the more painful it becomes. So instead of reaching towards a painkiller that, of course, can go through your system into your breast milk, I've found that binding absolutely mitigates those afterbirth pains. It's incredible. After I had my 5th baby, before I started binding, I put him to my breast and I started having those intense afterbirth pains. And again, being my 5th, they had gotten worse every single time, which is normal. And I could tell that this was going to be something that could possibly keep me up at night. And a lot of women report that it's not necessarily the newborn that's keeping them up at night. The afterbirth pains, the cramps that happen, that keep them from sleeping those first few nights. However, when I started binding, they completely went away. It mitigated all of the pain. So I definitely recommend binding that first day after you give birth so that you can take care of those afterbirth pains that have the possibility of keeping you up at night and not getting the rest that you need to get better and to be attentive to your newborn. So, the benefits of binding the day you give birth: helps with bleeding, helps with your posture and back issues, helps with afterbirth pains. These are all really big things. Also, a lot of women complain about what they call jelly belly, and it is one of those things that after you give birth, you still kind of look like you're 5 months pregnant, and it's just kind of this blob there. And it might not be physically uncomfortable, but looking at it and just feeling it there can be kind of emotionally uncomfortable. You really start feeling more put together. It starts closing your body back up. There are a lot of beliefs and traditions about how after you have a baby, you're leaving all these doors and windows open in your body, and you become more susceptible to illnesses and fatigue and things of that nature. And in order to really close up your body and start healing and becoming a whole person as just you, requires that kind of a practice. You need to listen to your body. Your body is the best indicator. If something is very uncomfortable, if it is hurting you, if it's pinching you, if it's putting a lot of pressure downwards and it's making it uncomfortable to sit or nurse or lay down or anything like that, then you should stop. Binding should not be uncomfortable. That being said, the beauty of Bengkung binding is that it is fully customizable to your body. With each wrap that you go around your body, you can customize the tightness. So you can maybe be a little less tight lower down, where it might be a little bit more tender right after labor, and then get tighter and tighter as you go up. If during labor you had a very long and extensive and intensive pushing time, then it might be a little bit more uncomfortable to put a lot of pressure lower down. That would be an example of a time when you would want to bind very loose lower down, so that you're not pushing and putting a lot of pressure on that area, so that you're giving it time to get the swelling down and be less tender. If you had an episiotomy or you tore, sometimes women report that, again, when they bind tightly those first few days, it can put some undue stress and pressure down there on their tear or their stitches. So again, another time when you can bind a little bit looser lower down. Some women, unfortunately, have to deal with hemorrhoids through their pregnancy, or they get hemorrhoids through the pushing process. And again, that is another situation where you can bind looser to put less pressure down below. Always listen to your body. That is my best suggestion to you. It will tell you if it's not ready. Now, if you bind tightly and you find that, again, there's too much pressure going down, try loosening it up. If you're still feeling discomfort, then there's no problem in putting the bind aside for a day or two and then trying it again. You're not going to lose any ground on getting your pre-pregnancy body back. If you experience some of these discomforts binding the day that you give birth, you have a little bit of help with the baby and a little bit of patience with binding, I'm sure you can find a way that you can bind loosely in the areas that are causing you the discomfort while still getting a lot of the benefits that we talked about before. I hope this has helped, at least given you some sort of a guideline to run with about binding directly after a vaginal birth. And if you are a C-section mama and want to know about how soon you should start binding after your C-section, I will link a video below that I made about that, and I'll post it after this video. But I hope, regardless, that you had a magical birth experience and a peaceful postpartum time. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them below. And until next time, be well.